Hello, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I want to welcome you to the Wesleyan Connection. This podcast is primarily for the clergy and laity of the Holston Annual Conference. Join with me now as I take a look around the connection and share some of the things happening in the churches of our annual conference. Good morning, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I want to welcome you to this week's edition of the Wesleyan Connection, a podcast about the people, events, ministries, and activities of the Holston Annual Conference. I say that, and today I'm going to break that rule. You know, when I started this podcast, I really wanted it to be about things happening in our annual conference, and I think I've done a very good job talking to people and getting their ideas and having them share about how they are relating to the annual conference and the churches of the conference and the ministries of the conference. If you go back and look at the 76 previous episodes, you'll find very few that focus on just me. Today, it's my podcast, and I'm going to talk about me. So if you don't want to listen, I can understand. What I'm going to say might not have anything to do with the overall nature and function of the Holston Annual Conference, but it does speak, I think, to all our hearts in terms of what does it mean to have a mountaintop experience where you feel close to God, and how do you bring that back into the world? Now, I might not always answer that question in the podcast in a way that's going to make sense, but what I'm sharing with you this morning is the audio from a video that I made and uploaded to Facebook for my church's Facebook page. And in it, I talk about that mountaintop experience that I had just last week at Emory and Henry College for the Upper Room 5-Day Spiritual Academy sponsored by Holston Conference on the topic of Celtic Spirituality. It was the best 5 days I've spent in a long, long time in terms of getting my spirits and getting my spirit back in the right place. And so I just invite you to listen to my, for lack of a better word, stream of consciousness thoughts on that topic as I've pulled the audio from the video that I made and put up on the site. So hope you enjoy. God bless. Come back next week. I don't know what I'll be doing next week. Might be more on this topic. It's still fresh in my mind, so I don't know where the Lord's leading me with this, but I hope you enjoy my monologue. I just wanted to share something today. August the 6th is one of those days on the liturgical calendar that is celebrated differently by different churches. Some churches celebrate that day as Transfiguration of the Lord Sunday. Methodists tend to place that day on the last Sunday prior to the beginning of Lent. Others have chosen August 6th as the day. And when you think about that story, that's the story of Jesus on the mountaintop with Peter, James, and John, and the Lord speaks to them and says, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased," and sets up that whole sort of scenario. Peter saying, "Lord, shall we build you a tabernacle here?" And so forth and so on. And Jesus was transfigured, and his garments shone white, brilliant, as a result of God transfiguring him and touching him on that day. From that, I think it's safe to say that we have developed that concept of a mountaintop experience. You know, mountaintops are those times in our lives when we have those revelations, when we have those moments of closeness to God, so much so that, like Peter, we want to build a tabernacle and stay there. We don't want to come down from the mountain because we are feeling so close to God, but yet we know that the pull of the real world, so to speak, is upon us, and we can't remain there forever. For me, one of those mountaintop experiences was last week. It was just coincidental that it ended with Jesus' mountaintop experience, or Peter, James, and John's mountaintop experience. Last week I went to the 5-day Upper Room Spiritual Academy hosted by the Holston Annual Conference at Emory and Henry College. This particular academy dealt with Celtic spirituality. I don't know how much you know about Celtic spirituality. I know a whole lot more now than my prior to going, and it was just an enlightening time for me in terms of my own spiritual growth, in terms of my own closeness to God. At my very core, I'm sort of an introvert. I don't especially get energized by being in front of large groups of people. Quite the contrary, that is a very draining time for me. Yet as a pastor, I'm sort of thrust in front of people on a regular basis, so to speak. Every Sunday I have to stand up, I have to preach. And every Sunday afternoon and sometimes into Monday, I feel the effects of it as it sort of saps my energy. But those mountaintop experiences, those times when you really feel close to God, for me, I get those in times of quiet, in times of prayer, in times of solitude. Last week I was together with about 28 or so other people. We practiced the great silence from about 9:30 at night when our final session ended until 7 the next morning when we gathered together as a community for prayer. We had silent moments during the day as well, and we talked about a world that most of us never think much about, the world of the Celts, men, women of Ireland and Scotland and Britain. And we're talking back around, let's see, my century's right, late 300s into the 400s. So that would make it the 4th and 5th centuries up through about the middle of the first, about 1066, 1100, so up through about the 12th century. It was a time in which these people who had been evangelized by early Christians making their way over into the British Isles, and they eagerly accepted the gospel, and then in the 400s or so, they began to have more intentional efforts in that region. The Roman Catholic Church sent over missionaries, St. Patrick being among them, the first to go and to really begin preaching there in Ireland. And the Celtic Church, as a result, developed, and it developed in ways that were quite distinct from the Roman Catholic Church. You've got to remember, they were part of the Roman Catholic Church. However, they saw the world in a much different way, whereas the Roman Catholic Church at the time, even in the 400s, was becoming hierarchical and beginning to try to standardize the ways that the churches did things. The Celtic Church was very much free form. They were a people of the land. They were shepherds. They were farmers. They were fishermen. They were people that lived off the rugged land and knew the land like the back of their hands. They were a people that were especially caught up with the idea of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Most all of their prayers, most all of their religious teachings will have reference to the Trinity generally. You didn't just pray to Jesus, you prayed to the Trinity, because if you had Jesus, you also had the Father, you also had the Son. To have one was to have them all, so to speak. And that's one of the great strengths of that church, was they were extremely Trinitarian. They followed Christian doctrines of the early church. They were very much in line with the teachings of the church. Some folks have said that there were three main apostles that the churches tended to follow. You had the apostles that followed Peter, which began those churches in Jerusalem and the Middle East there. You had those that followed after Paul. Protestants tend to be very Paulish in the way they look at things. And you had those that followed after the Apostle John, the one that, if you look at the Gospels, was extremely close to Jesus. The one that they say, if you look at the one of the stories in John's Gospel, he's leaning upon Jesus' breast as they are leaning around the table. When they sat, they didn't sit up at tables. They sort of laid down sideways and leaned on each other. And it's John, they say, by tradition, whose head could hear the heartbeat of God as he laid there close to Christ during that meal. And the Celts were especially fond of John and John's gospel. I don't know how to wrap up what that week was like for me. I don't know how to explain how it has refreshed me, how it has brought me to a mountaintop kind of experience. Here's time for confession. One of the things that I, as a pastor, do is pray. One of the things that Satan tries to do is to keep me from praying. And he does that by saying to me, whispering in my ear, "You're wasting your time. Why would you want to be doing that? Prayer, it's useless." No. Prayer is not useless. Prayer is something that can turn the world upside down. Prayer is something that calls heaven and earth together and God's power into our midst. Prayer is something that can change us. Now, I don't always pray in a way that most people would probably want me to pray. I'm not a real good prayer warrior in terms of supplication. I'm more of a contemplative, someone that likes to pray and try to experience God's presence in the prayer. I'm not the strongest. The strongest suit of mine is not having a list of people and praying through that list, although that's what I do. I have an app called PrayerMate that helps me keep track of all my congregation members and all the things going on in their life. Whenever I hear that something's happening, I'll make a note of it in sort of like a little electronic card file for that person or that family, and their name regularly comes up then in my prayer list. And I look at the cards and I go, okay, this is how I'm praying. This is what's apparently important for this particular person at this time. And so prayer is indeed an important thing for me. And my goal is to begin to say to Satan, I'm not wasting my time. You're the one that needs to be running scared. You're the one that needs to be turning away. You're the one that needs to be saying, you see, I have understood in a way that maybe I've really not accepted in my heart before. The power of prayer is going to change me. And in changing me, I'm hoping it will help change my church. And in changing my church, I'm hoping it'll help change my community. And in changing my community, I'm hoping it will help us change the world. I've been to the mountaintop, the youth like to sing at Resurrection. Well, I've been to the mountaintop. I've come back down to the valley below now, and I'm living out my life trying to comprehend the power and the presence of God in my life, in my church, in my community. For the Celts, God was present in everything they did. And I'm going to try to find a way to make that part of the church experience that you find when you come to Trinity. And I hope others will try to make that a part of the church experience in their local churches as well. So, I hope you've enjoyed this sort of off-the-cuff talk. Come Sunday, I'm not sure where the Lord is going to be leading me, but I think the Lord might be leading me to talk more about this topic of Celtic spirituality and what the mountaintop is like and what it's like to come back down into the valley below and how to live your lives there. So God bless. Have a great day, and I'll be praying for you, and I hope that you will be praying for me. This is Pastor Terry Goodman. This is Pastor Goodman. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. Be sure to check back often for more podcasts.